Welcome. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And this is James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com, and we both welcome you to the 94th episode of The New World Next Week, which you can find at the new and improved NewWorldNextWeek.com. It's a new site that's a lot more simple, it's a lot cleaner, and can give you all the links simply to the ways that you can watch, download, share the audio, video versions of these and all the other episodes in New World Next Week. James, let's get right to it with our first story. That is something we have not, I believe, explicitly covered on New World Next Week, so we're able to cover this as well with the latest updates. Coming from the Columbia Broadcasting System and the Associated Press, but posted to my own holyhexes.com, Sandusky cuffed on new sex abuse charges. Former Penn State assistant football coach Jerry Sandusky has been arrested on new sex abuse charges brought by two new accusers. Authorities say Sandusky was arrested and arraigned today, Wednesday, December 7th, a date which will live in infamy. The charges were brought after the new accusers were questioned by a grand jury. Both alleged victims were part of Sandusky's Second Mile charity. One claims he was assaulted in 1997, the other in 2004. Attorney General Linda L. Kelly said the two young men, identified as Victim 9 and Victim 10, were allegedly targeted by Sandusky when they were children. As in many of the other cases identified to date, the contact with Sandusky allegedly fit a pattern of grooming victims, Kelly said. Beginning with outings to football games and gifts, they later included physical contact that escalated to sexual assaults. At Sandusky's first arraignment last month on the original charges involving 8 alleged victims, bail was set at $100,000, which he made, allowing him to have been free on bail. Now the questions come up: is he a flight risk? Is he a suicide risk even? James, before I throw this back to you, I want to stress that this kind of story, and this is what I've kind of been saying on my own show since this scandal broke, is for people to stop being surprised about this scandal and learn about its connections to the elite at large. And if we look at the last week or so of news, we can see former Sheriff Pat Sullivan trades blue uniform for orange jumpsuit out of Colorado. The fantastic work of Jonathan Elenoff at NewWorldOrderReport.com basically got a sheriff arrested for exchanging drugs for sex and all kinds of other shady operations. There's a sex scandal brewing at Syracuse University, and we also have the Phoenix, Arizona notorious Sheriff Joe Arpaio apologizing for a large number of sex crime cases in his office that were mishandled. So, James, it is the conspiracy of silence.
Exactly right, my friend. I think that, to me, is the point of this, because honestly, this whole Sandusky trial thing and all of this, I'm not really following it at all. It doesn't really affect my life in any way, but I think it is important, as you say, to look at the connections of all the different types of scandals that fit in with this pattern, including, of course, the Boys Town scandal that happened in the 1980s with Larry King, not Larry King, the CNN host, but Larry King and all of those Republicans who were paying for sex with young boys. And all of, I mean, we see this as a pattern repeating and repeating and repeating. And it's one of those patterns that we're doomed to repeat unless we know the history. So I hope people do check into things like conspiracy of silence, as you mentioned. And I hope we'll include a link for that with this video. But yeah, it just keeps adding up, and it's just the same thing over and over. And again, if we don't know about it, how are we ever going to stop it?
This has been a pretty big story here in the States, but I can't help but wonder if it's only because it's connected to show business and sports, and that's the only reason people care about it. But these are disgusting stories, and it's tough to want to go into this in great detail. But one of my main writers in the Media Monarchy Kingdom is actually based in Omaha, and he's been covering this and all the related stories on holyhexes.com pretty extensively over the last several weeks. Any final words on this before we move to our second story, James?
Well, not at this time. Let's just go on to number 2.
Our second story is one that has only been brewing and breaking over the last 12 to 24 hours. Detention camp order follows preparations for civil unrest. KBR seeks subcontractors to outfit emergency environment centers. And we take this from Paul Joseph Watson. The revelation that Halliburton subsidiary KBR is seeking subcontractors to staff and outfit emergency environment camps located in 5 regions of the United States follows preparations over the last 3 years to deal with riots inside the United States that have already spread throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. As Infowars.com reported December 6th, a document sent by a State Department employee confirms that Kellogg Brown & Root Services are looking to activate camps built for FEMA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers across the United States. This, of course, follows the Senate's recent passage of the National Defense Authorization Act, the Senate Bill 1867, and we note Section 1031 of the National Defense Authorization Act allows American citizens to be snatched off the street and held in detention camps without trial. James.
Well, this, again, is exactly the type of story we were just covering. It's the type of story where it doesn't mean so much in isolation, but I think in context it's extremely worrying. And the context is one that's just really overwhelming and difficult to get into. I did a 10-minute summary of it called U.S. Army Prepares to Invade U.S., which is now my most watched YouTube video and is approaching 1 million views, because it's a 10-minute summary of all of this history of these types of operations and the FEMA things and all of the Army preparations for martial law. And here is just the next step on this road. And it's important for people to realize that this is a process that's been going on for decades and likely will continue to go on for decades, unless, of course, there is a catalyzing catastrophic event to justify the big clampdown. But again, I don't want to sit here and cry wolf and say that it's going to happen all tomorrow and everybody better be ready for it. I mean, I think you should be ready for it, just generally speaking, but I think to me, it's part of that insidious process of just one step at a time along the road to martial law. And that's how even the best intentioned societies, even with good people, can end up in horrific tyranny. So unfortunately, this is just another data point on a larger graph, and it indicates exactly where America is heading, and I think we all know where that is.
Now, you didn't hear this, but I was just a little bit ago on the Bob Tuskin show on Oracle Broadcasting, and you just essentially echoed both of our sentiments on there about crying wolf. And I know myself, when I was turned on to alternative history and alternative media post 9/11, the inclination and the urge sometimes to cry wolf and to start hitting up your friends and families with messages saying, martial law is coming tomorrow, the FEMA camps are coming to get you tomorrow, and it does cry wolf, and it does kind of destroy the message. And over the last 10 years post 9/11, we've seen it doesn't generally happen that way. It is the frog boil.
Well, so yeah, that's it. I think it is the boiling frog analogy right here, and that's exactly why I think it's important for us not to hyperventilate about each story, but to certainly lay it out to people, and as I say, to be ready. There's nothing wrong in being ready for some sort of event to happen, but I think we have to temper that with the understanding that the most insidious way for them to do this, and probably the most successful, would be if they did it in stages instead of all at once.
You mean such as if they kind of slowly destroyed, the institutions that we've taken, for so much, our schools and our banking and our religion? You mean if those things would all kind of happen to fall apart all at the same time, just coincidentally?
Yeah, something like that.
So now let's move to our third and final story this week for, again, another way to sort of cover stories we may not have touched on in the last several weeks, but also do it in a way to get the latest updates. Gingrich renews food stamp attack on Obama, and we'll take this from USA Today. Newt Gingrich is reviving his criticism of President Obama as the finest food stamp president in history, a claim proved to be oversimplified and not quite true. Gingrich, in an interview with CNBC Tuesday night, had this to say, quote, "We are going to have the candidate of food stamps, the finest food stamp president in the American history in Barack Obama, and we're going to have a candidate of paychecks," end quote. What's missing in Gingrich's argument is that the number of food stamp recipients started to go up during George W. Bush's presidency, the previous puppet administration, and that's how it seems like this political game constantly gets played. We blame the current guys that we'll refer to and have been referred to as birdcage liner. They're there to take all the crap, and when they can't handle anymore, they get pulled out and they get replaced, and we pay attention to, the shadows on the wall like Gingrich and Obama. And of course, we don't have time to get into Opus Dei and all the shady connections, but James, could I maybe suggest in the future a Meet Newt Gingrich episode of the podcast?
I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, because I'm hoping he will just lose handily in the primaries, and we'll never hear of him politically again. That's my dream. But you're right. I mean, he is a creature, a vile creature. And on the note of what he's talking about here, again, you're exactly right. It is a game, and the most insulting part is it's just such a childish game of history began on January 20th, 2009, and nothing before that matters, because now it's the other side's puppet that's in power, so he's responsible for all the evils in the world. When of course neither Bush nor Obama are responsible for anything. They are paid puppets who read off a teleprompter and do what they're told, and there's absolutely nothing, not one single thought that goes through their head that matters anything to the direction of the country. So so arguing about left and right, arguing about Obama and Bush is like arguing over, I don't know, Tom and Jerry. I mean, it matters absolutely nothing. I'm talking about the cartoon characters, not the ice cream, obviously. But anyway, oh wait, that's Ben and Jerry's. But actually, I mean, absolutely, it's a stupid argument to make, because what's going on in the economy is what's happening in the financial infrastructure that governs the economy. It has nothing to do with the presidential puppets that are in power. So I just wanted to throw that out there to people. It's so much of a distraction from what's really going on and what the real root cause of the problem is, which is the banking collapse, which has been engineered in order to engineer the global superstructure, which, by the way, tomorrow, December 9th, is going to be the next EU summit, where they decide on this European stability mechanism and decide whether or not to put generations of Europeans into debt servitude. So that's a pretty big event that'll be happening tomorrow.
Now, to just tie in some of the other things that I wanted to mention that I find really interesting, that now, the GOP field here in the States is down to the top tier. It's number 1, Newt Gingrich, and number 3, Mitt Romney. It becomes more and more just amazing as the days go by, the extent to which the mainstream media will go out of their way, bending over backwards to not mention Ron Paul, not only in stories or in but period. I put out on my Twitter account at Media Monarchy an interesting thing. I'm surprised they included it also in the online piece, because I saw it in print in the New York Times the other day, talking about how now all the GOP guys are all starting to unleash the money to buy the ads in New Hampshire and Iowa. And they have screen grabs, and I just find it really interesting that the screen grab they use for Ron Paul essentially says, Ron Paul has been. And to me, being a student of media, know that there's no way that that's an accident. They want to implant the idea that Ron Paul is a has-been, and the New York Times has a pretty amazing history of sort of putting down Ron Paul in their photos and just all of their coverage. And I've said, if not here, I know I've said it on my show, I've not been as an excited or ardent, supporter of Ron Paul this time around. I guess as each time goes around, the 4 years and the 8 years, you just start to become more depressed and don't really want to put your time and energy into it. So, James, as we start to wrap this up here and stop all my digressions, this story about Newt and Obama is roughly about food stamps. And folks may have noticed that we haven't really discussed stories on my own foodworldorder.com. You and I, however, we're going to give it our best go and start covering Food World Order stories on your own live show on Republic Broadcasting. So I'll point folks into that direction.
That's right. Again, my show's on every weeknight, 11 p.m. Central on Republic Broadcasting, and absolutely will be, hopefully every week, every Thursday night, we'll be talking about Food World Order stories. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So thank you for doing that.
I can't wait, and I think it's, as we've discussed so many times here, it's one of the most important things going on. As we've said, well, I may not be able to start, or rather stop, the wars abroad, and I certainly can't stop comets and things from crashing here, any of that kind of stuff, but we can control, or at least start to make better choices about what we shove down our gullet.
That's the point. All right, well, that'll do it for this week. Thank you again for three more stories.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. Take care.